has alcohol and drugs related to it. Same, mind changers. Mind changers that affect our thinking about ourselves and our thinking about other people. And that's what we're told not to do. So avoid these mind changers. I mean, our teachings keep telling us that. It's just fortunate that in many of our communities we have lots of people who are avoiding those today. There are probably a number of homes that are free of alcohol and drugs, but there are certainly a great many of them that are indulging in alcohol and drugs in our communities. And so that leads to these other issues in our communities. These are simple instructions, but for some reason they're really difficult to follow. And we haven't figured out why they're so difficult. Why do we love doing the wrong thing? You know? I mean, we're just prone to do it as human beings. We just love doing the wrong thing. And that's, you know, when you look at our people understood psychology, and we need more people understanding our indigenous psychology so we can understand why we love doing the wrong thing. You know, if we could figure that out, we would be all following the great law. So why? We have, and the simple answer is we have multi-generational trauma. It's still prevalent in our communities. We still have that. What happened 2 generations ago is still affecting us today. And we still experience it. And we experience it ourselves, some of us, through our own violence. We don't know where some people will say, oh, I don't even know why I'm violent today or why I'm angry, but suddenly I just feel like punching somebody. Where does that come from, you know? And did it come from your dad? Did it come from your mother? Did it come from your grandfather or your great-grandfather? Or you just watched the show last night on TV, which is the other thing, and it was the show Bury My Heart at Wounded Knee, and I got so pissed off, I wanted to go beat somebody up. You know, and it could be that. We are all stimulated by this stuff. You know, and I remember, you know, there are lots of stuff out there. Or you might have went to Canadian Tire to buy something, and the clerk says, oh, not another one of them status cards. You know, why do you guys get tax exemption? You know, and then that pisses you off. You know, and so there's lots of stuff out there that can affect us. Lots of racism out there, subtle as it may be, or even quite blunt in many cases, that affect our minds. And when our minds are affected in that way, when we're angry about stuff, it's pretty hard to learn about skana when you're angry. To learn about peace, learn about Gayan Lagoa, and you're angry. It's pretty hard to do that. So by tomorrow morning, I want you to check the eraser out by the door that we're going to have. It's going to erase you of all your anger so that you can hear everything that's said tomorrow. But I mean, that's one. I wish we could have something like that. But I think the more we become aware of it, the more we understand it, the easier it is for us to be able to address that. We can create our own eraser to erase some of these hard feelings, hard emotions that drive us at times and that get in the way of our learning. The other thing about colonialism is that it impacts us at 5 different levels. You know, and I think that we don't realize it, but when you look at the Confederacy as a whole, it certainly impacts the Confederacy, and we're going to take a look at one of those things. I may have already talked about it, but one of the things that how colonialism has affected the Confederacy, we use the boundary line between Canada and the US. We use that against each other. Oh, those guys are from north of the line. We don't have to listen to them. Those guys are down south. They are south of the line. They don't know what they're talking about. You know, so we end up using the border, which is really a colonial line running through our country, and we use it to define ourselves. I mean, after the Buffalo Creek Treaty, we always heard stories, well, there's the American Confederacy and the Canadian Confederacy. Hello? Hello, we're the same people. There's no such thing as American Confederacy and Canadian Confederacy. We are one people. And we have to start acting like it. So we have to erase that thing that's in our minds that talks about that border. Yeah, it's an inconvenience today. You know, and it shouldn't be, but it is. It's an inconvenience as we travel across our country. But it should never be in here. If it's out there, because there's Canada and US, we should never put that in here and use it against each other. Saying, oh, those guys belong to the American Confederacy, but we're the Canadian Confederacy. I could never understand that, but I mean, I remember hearing people say that, and you still hear, I remember we had this big meeting in the Longhouse here back in, it was about 1982, and we were all battling the Constitution at that time. Some of you may remember that the Canadian Constitution was being repatriated. And we were putting a team together that was going to go to England and argue about our treaties, those wonderful treaties that I was talking about. And we were all going to go over there and argue that but the point of it is that we were a sovereign nation, and as a confederacy. And we were having this big discussion in the Longhouse. We pretty much had, everyone was agreed to work together on it. We were selecting a delegation. And then somebody got up and said, well, you know, who was from the US side, said, why do we have to worry about this? That has nothing to do with us. You know, it's just you Canadian Indians that got to worry about this. You know, that statement, it was like a knife. It was sent in a room and it just cut through everybody that was trying to build a coalition between our communities. And it was between our own selves. And we started to argue amongst ourselves around this. And it really took the wind out of the sails of that whole, we had to just say, come on, stay here, you know, don't leave. We almost got it. I mean, a bunch of us were just trying to keep it going, keep it alive, eh? Keep this energy going. But somebody wanted to destroy it. But we still were able to put a delegation together and send them over to England and argue about our sovereignty and our nationhood. But it wasn't as strong as it could have been. And I think that those moments when we step on each other's toes and slap each other in the face over these political differences as a confederacy, we end up hurting ourselves. We end up hurting all of us. And we end up hurting our future generations when we do that. We don't realize that. We've got to be able to stop the violence, stop hurting ourselves. You know, and I'll be saying that over and over again today for the next 20 years, if I'm around next 20 years. Stop the violence. Stop hurting each other. So at the Confederacy level, there are things that we can actually do as a Confederacy to make it stronger. You know, and I think it's really important. At the nation level, when you look at, say, Oneidas, we have communities of Oneidas in Wisconsin, here in New York, Grand River, our primary communities, and we have people living all over the place. But as a nation, we've attempted over the years to try and bring some sort of cohesion among all of our communities. It's been difficult. You know, I mean, there are people in some of our communities that don't like us, or don't like each other, But we have to work through that. We have to continuously find a place, a dialogue, to try and build a coalition of ourselves, of being Oneida. Whether you're here, Wisconsin, New York, Grand River, wherever you live, you are still Haudenosaunee. You know, and how do we do that? So there's lots of work around being a nation as well. And certainly the Mohawk communities, lots of work there, right? Let me talk about that for a while. I love talking about our brothers. Just don't get mad. But you look at all the communities there, you know, and when you look at all those communities and you look at the number of people who are starting new longhouses or rebuilding longhouses and doing ceremonies, it's growing and it's getting stronger. You know, and we should look at it from that perspective. Not look at it, what do the guys think they're doing over there? You know, what right do they have? You know, you hear attitudes like that too, like that's the wrong attitude. If you're Haudenosaunee and you're Haudenosaunee, that's the wrong attitude to be putting down our own people. We shouldn't be doing that. You know, and we should be talking about skana. You should be able to say that before you put somebody down. Because that doesn't fit. It doesn't fit. And we have to train ourselves to be more open and listening and open arms towards each other as a people. You look at our own communities, definitely our own communities, we got lots of work in our own communities. I mean, we look at our own community here, we got a lot of factions in our community here. You know, I mean, we're no different from any of our communities. And every one of our communities have all these various factions that we try to understand, we try to work with them, we try to reach out to them, we try to understand, we do all kinds of stuff to try and bring ourselves together. But we are a product of the colonization. That's what that is when we look at it. Then we look at our families and our clans, same thing. You know, our families and clans are all divided and split up and mad at each other and da-da-da-da, it goes on. And it's because we're colonized. We can't see the love we have for each other. We can't make that first before our attitude towards someone else. You know, and our attitudes always seem to come first. And that's what's challenging. When you look at that whole, as you go up that list, it comes down to the person. Can we personally do a change in our own life? And that's really the only power that we do have, is to make the changes in ourselves so that we can help our clan, so then we can help our community, then we can help our nation, then we can help the Confederacy. But it has to come from within ourselves, to be open-minded, to have an open heart, to be able to listen to all the stuff that we've had experience over the years, and for generations. You know, and I mean, all of those teachings that we have, it was about that. It was about us being, becoming more of a people, of a society, of a nation. We functioned as that pre-contact. We had huge villages pre-contact. We lived in towns. We must have liked each other. If we lived in these towns and these huge villages and all of that, we must have really liked each other. But for some reason, we have a tough time doing that today. You know, and that's what we got to learn how to do. We got to learn how to do that, because one of the invading thoughts that have come into our world from the invaders, from the Western society, is individualism. Individualism has a priority over our collectiveness. Our thought has always been our collectivity. How are we going to be we as a people? Not I. But I has become higher than we in our thinking. And that's what's really altering our culture. When we have individualism takes a priority over our collectiveness, over our family and our clan, and our thought about our community, when that becomes greater than that, then our culture is losing. Individualism has only a small corner in our culture. It's what you do in terms of your fasting, in terms of your vision quest, in terms of your taking care of yourself, but primarily when you reach out beyond that, it's about our collectiveness. You know, that's why we didn't have capitalism. That's why we didn't have profit-making ventures. We had community business. We had clan business. You know, so our whole, when we get into individualism, then we're definitely going to get into capitalism and that system, and then that system is going to alter our world. And I mean, it already is. I mean, you look at the massive amounts of business and wealth that's created, that's really individual wealth. It has nothing to do with collective or community wealth. I mean, as a communities, when you look across the Confederacy, there's a lot of wealth in the Confederacy, but it's owned wealth by individuals. It does not contribute to the nation or to the Confederacy as a whole. You know, and that's one of the things I think we really need to understand. That's part of the colonialism too. So our current reality is that the large majority of our people are colonized. How many people here are colonized? How many people on it? There's a few people who are willing to admit it. Randy was the first one. I'm having fun too, he says. I think that's really one of the interesting things about the colonization is that we really have to admit how much we are colonized. If we're going to do something about it, you know, we can't deny it. You know, if we deny it, we're never going to do anything about it. You know, and I think when you look at our teachings, it really tells us to be able to confront it. You know, the last message was about confronting it. So the outside influences are in our everyday lives. They invade our communities and even our longhouses. You know, all of those outside influences, and even when we're having ceremonies. Howard's phone goes off. You know, some colonizers calling him. But he says it's going diesel. He corrects it right away. But I mean, that's the way we are, eh? I mean, people don't realize that. I mean, those phones, you got them in your purse or in your pocket. They go off, you listen. You're sitting in a ceremony, you listen to it, you read your text, you know, and your mind is taken away from the ceremony. You're now in your text, talking to somebody who is in Chicago or Milwaukee, you know, or Green Bay, or in London. And that's how easy it is to get distracted. That's why I always say, you know, when you're going to ceremonies, really devote your attention to that. And over the next few days, turn off your phones, you know, and really devote your attention to these teachings. And the thing that's going to be good about the teachings is that, yeah, it's going to be done in a language, but they're going to translate every half hour. You know, so it's going to help those of us that don't know the language. It's going to help us to be able to listen to it, you know, and understand it, what is being said. You know, I think so. Focus on those teachings. Don't allow those things to invade us. But I want you to really think about, you know, if you're really going to study these teachings, I know people who are gifted around these teachings. I just think they're amazing that they can remember these stories, and you look at them. I mean, they've got these special gifts of memory, and I mean, a lot of us don't have that, and we forget where we left our keys, Don't know how you're going to get home, But all of, that kind of memory is amazing. And we should always honor these people. And if you have children, I always tell people, if you have children who have photographic memory, and if they have that gift, get them involved with these teachings. If you have grandchildren or children, get them into learning these. Because that's what we need. We need more people, younger people, to learn these teachings and to be able to recite the Great Law or Gai Wheel or the ceremonies or the songs or whatever. Get them involved with it so that they are taking it on. That's your family's contribution. And so we have to really start paying attention to how our children are learning, and if they have that gift, to be able to do that. We need to find ways to help people understand colonialism as well. And you look at the stuff, and I mean, that's one of the reasons why we put this presentation together. And there's lots of material out there. One of the curriculums I designed is called What Was Never Told, and it's really about looking at the teachings for 7 to 10 days. You go through all of this material, and you really understand, you look at all the stuff that we are not told. I mean, there's detailed stuff. I mean, there's stuff still coming out today. What's the most recent thing? Last week, or 2 weeks ago. They were starving Indian children in residential schools as an experiment to see how starvation affects the human body. So here's a whole bunch of kids, our children sitting in a residential school being starved methodically over a year, 2 years, 3 years, up to 5 years. I think some of those studies went on to determine how starvation affects the human body. That's how devious it is. That's colonialism. When you read stuff like that, understand it as colonialism. And colonialism is intended. It's not a mistake. They intentionally come here to destroy us. That's what we have to understand. And you look at all of the various programs that are designed to do that, whether it's sterilization, all of those stuff that went on. I mean, once they get into that, I mean, I imagine they were doing sterilization in residential schools because Indian Health Services was doing it. So young girls were sterilized, throughout Indian country. So they were after us. And if you turn around, they'll be right behind you. Because they're still after you. They're still after your mind. So I call it leading the decolonization work. As leaders, we need to come to understand and agree about decolonization. We need to understand the impact of colonization on the Haudenosaunee. I put this map on here generally because this is a map of our original territory. And if you could see the dots on there, the red dots are our holdings today. That's our territorial holdings today, is the red dots on there, and you can hardly see them. That's how much land we have today. Out of millions of acres of land of our original country, we have a few dots, a few acres here and there. And that map is a symbol of how colonization has impacted our world. They have stolen all of that land. And remember, it's stolen. I don't care whether you say it's a treaty or not, it's still stolen. Those agreements are agreements with thieves. So all of that territory is what we have left, and that's where we have to build from. When I look at it and say, oh man, you can get really depressed looking thinking about that. I lost 6 million acres yesterday. In fact, 10 years ago, the court decision, I lost another 6 million acres. You know, do you think about it and say, you can think about it in that way, or you have to think about it in our future generations, how can we get our land back? That is the question that we should be asking ourselves. How can we get our land back? What do we need to do to acquire our land back? I don't care if it's a foot at a time. How do we get it back? You know, do we buy it? Do we steal it back? Do we do like they do and just go out and steal it? That's what I keep saying. Let's go steal this land over here. You know, make it ours. You know, and you think about it, I mean, when our numbers get larger and we have a greater population, I mean, we should be strong today. We have over 100,000 people in the Confederacy. The population of all our communities combined is over 100,000 people. And we should not be feeling sorry about ourselves. And we should be able to exercise that authority, that will, to recover ourselves as a nation, as a country. And that's what we need to be able to think about. And that's how we should be thinking about the future. How can we combine all our energy to make that happen? Yeah, it's going to take maybe 2 or 3 generations. But we have to leave that message for every generation from here on, because our ancestors left that message with us. You know, they left it with us. They says, no matter what, think of yourself. Think of yourself as Haudenosaunee, think of yourself as Haudenosaunee, and that you have a right to be who you are. We have that absolute right to be who we are. And we need to move in that kind of positive energy and feeling about ourselves, not to allow the law of no to get in the way. Oh no, we can't do that. We're not big enough yet. We're not strong enough. Don't think that way. You know, so we need to confront the colonialism in our world today in a way that's going to be much more dynamic from this day forward. You know, and that's what we were saying, like, you know, let's have the great law reading every year. Let's gather and figure this out. You know, over the next few generations, we're going to be a different people. You know, as long as we can remember how these teachings inform us. I talked about this stuff already, some of us, the impact, as the U.S. and Canadian border needs to be removed from our thinking. We can't let that divide us. You know, it has in the past. We need to follow the decision to fill all 50 seats of the Confederacy. You know, we went over this presentation with some of the chiefs about a couple months ago, and they were thinking about it. You know, and I think that's important. If we can think about it today, we need to do that. We need to fill all the 50 seats. We need to, not only that, but all those positions that come behind that role, or that are part of that role, so that we have the full, what do you call it? Full group of people working for this in each of the clans. And we need that to happen. And the other thing is we need to recruit the young people to help with the work of the Confederacy. There are a lot of things that I think that we need to do to think about. And there's a lot of young minds out there that are amazing, you know, that can help us, you know, and are trying to sort this out. I was going to send her somebody out, but I don't even know whether she's here or not. Is Sherry Antone here? No, she's not here. Maybe she's coming tomorrow. She's a young lady from here who's doing her master's degree at the University of Vic. And she's helping us with the Chiefs Council with a project of how we can reestablish traditional government back in our community. And her young mind is working on that idea. And that mind got wore out thinking about that for the last 40 years. You know, when you think about it, you know, when you look at our communities, one of the symbols of colonialism in our communities is the band council system. It is a strong symbol of colonialism. There's a system that we have, I think, as a nation of people, we have shifted over and allowed them to be in our presence, that system. And we've made room for them. That's the way I look at it. Whether we have or not, I mean, it was an imposed system. And in 1880s in Haudenosaunee and out that way, it was an imposed system. 1924 at Grand River, it was imposed. You know, in 1934, it was imposed here. You know, and you look at the histories of other communities. You know, I mean, in 1934, was it 34 also in Green Bay, reorganization. It became a system there, the business committee there. And there are other stories. Every community has their own story. But those elective systems of government are part of the factionalism that exists in our communities. You know, and they're part of our reality. And maybe most of the times we just ignore them. We put a blinder on as we drive by the band office. We try to ignore it, you know, but in reality, I mean, they can be detrimental to us, and I mean that's a long story. I don't know whether we have time to talk about that, but just one point, I guess. When I think about what they're doing, like if there's as the band councils are organizing. Today they're called what's called the Iroquois Caucus that's organizing north of the line. And they are becoming an instrument of moving the colonialism even further. But what they're doing is they're taking our teachings, our Haudenosaunee teachings, and infusing them into that system, causing our teachings to be manipulated, or the true meaning of those teachings are lost in that manipulation of our teachings inside of what they're doing. I think some of them have some good intention. I mean, we would only imagine that if they are one of us, that they should have some good intention about what they're doing. But they're not doing it in concert with the teachers of these teachings. You know, the elders, the chiefs, the leaders of these teachings. You know, if they're doing it in opposition to our teachers, which is, I think, is in the end, is going to cause. It's going to. I was trying to think of a nicer word to say, but it really, the only word I can think of is bastardization of our culture. Is what they're doing to it. You know, if somebody's got a better word than that, I'll use it. But that's the only thing I can think about, which means that they're really destroying our teachings by putting it in their boat or their ship. Because you have to remember that elective systems are not in a canoe, they're in a ship, because they are a part of that foreign government. So they are over there, and they're taking stuff from our canoe into that ship. That's the best analogy we can put to it when you use Gaswenta. And the more they do that, take stuff over there, it becomes, what does it become over there? It becomes symbolic more than it becomes real. You know, and the more it becomes symbolic, the less feeling we have for it in terms of our people. You know, so suddenly the tree of peace as a symbol has less meaning because it's being manipulated over here as a symbol of what they're doing, and when it should be only over here in the canoe. You know, and suddenly Skana has a whole different meaning too. Over there it means having a party with Prime Minister Harper. You know, over here it means following our way of life. You know, so that's one of the things that is really important for us to understand, is where does our thinking lie around all of that? You know, so we have this young lady who's looking at all that stuff and looking at what we've tried to work with the electoral system since 1982. And they're our relatives. But, you know, we got sore toes for them stepping on them all the time. You know, and really unable to have an open heart and open mind around these teachings. You know, and I mean, we've tried many, many ways to try and figure out how we can build a system that's going to be collective and where we all have a say, and, you know, and we can all live happy and celebrate our way of life and all this good stuff. We try to do that, and we keep trying to do that, but on various levels we still try to. But it doesn't seem to go anywhere, right? Because the problem with that system